we all have our own mission in life. We all have our own obstacles. We all have our own triumphs, and they look different from everyone. And you could think someone's life looks great because they're fast, but in reality, that when they wake up on Monday morning and life is back to regular scheduled programming, things are a lot more difficult. And so I just think it's a great reminder of just who we are as humans, the things that we could do for each other to do better, to be more supportive, to be more encouraging, to be more welcoming. And it always brings you back to earth.
How you doing, Coach?
Hey, good morning. It's Tuesday. We are slightly one day behind on the Crushing Iron Triathlon podcast.
Yes, we are, but it's kind of tough to rebound like that.
It's tough. It's tough to do a back-to-back like that. I have appreciation for those athletes that turn off back-to-backs. But we've been here in the past. We've been bumping things from an Ironman race on a Sunday that you and I both attended, or one of us has attended or raced, and bumped it to Tuesday because usually at least one of us is traveling back on Monday, or we're just super, super tired from a long day of racing or spectating. And that was the case as yesterday. We were recovering from spectating Ironman Louisville, which was Sunday, and I traveled back to Chattanooga very early that morning, and then spent the rest of my day with family, hanging out, and trying to show my appreciation for them putting up with my crazy travel schedule that has been this year, and back at it today. So excited, lots to go through, lots to reminisce on, as we got to meet a lot of really fantastic people this last weekend.
Can you believe it, man? How many cool people?
Yeah, I keep thinking they're gonna like run out of like cool people, and somebody's gonna walk up and be like, yeah, that wasn't a very cool person. But they continue to impress, and we did. You and I got in on Friday and got to meet a lot of really awesome people pre-race, and then giving out high fives during the race. And yeah, it was awesome. It's always great to meet people that happen to listen to our podcast. And as we already kind of know, they've got to be cool to an extent, because if they've been patient enough this podcast and put up with it, then you know that they're like extra patient and probably have a lot of grace, because I mean, let's be honest, the first probably 294 we're kind of mediocre. We've kind of picked up here the negative split, but no, it's always great to meet anyone that listens and hear the feedback and the kind words. And it was great to, as usual, experience that like we did this last weekend in Louisville.
Yeah, and sometimes it does take a little while, I think, to get into our podcast, because you get in here and you're like expecting 10 ways to get faster on the bike, and we're not necessarily going to dive down that road all the time. But it's you and I. I'm the age grouper. Started triathlon around the age of 50. You've been my coach ever since, and now it's 7 years later or whatever. And we're best buddies, and we just talk triathlon because this is what we used to do anyway. We would hang out and just
so true.
Talk about stuff like this, and we just love the sport, and we love to dive into it and kind of explore our experiences and our athletes' experiences, and just we think a lot of it resonates with people, but sometimes it's not like, straight to the point. It's it's a long form conversation.
It is. It is like you said. It's definitely triathlon related, but it is triathlon as it relates to life, and vice versa. Because there are. And that's some of my initial thoughts just from spectating Louisville. It's just, and we say this, and I think, sport, as much as like there's like a million different reality shows on television these days, and that's like what our society has kind of gravitated towards, is sports is, without question, in my opinion, like the greatest analogy of life. And like you can, like, from watching any kind of like football game, basketball, whatever sport tickles your fancy, you can always drive some kind of like analogy from sports and life, and how they intertwine and how they reflect on the same things. And that was, again, like evident, and just watching again, which is like my fourth Ironman to spectate, and like seventh or eighth race in general to spectate and watch this last weekend. I'm just constantly reminded of how endurance sports especially mirrors life. And in so many ways, and the positives we can take from it, and the lessons that we can learn. And it was a great weekend. I do have to say that I was wrong.
You're wrong.
I was wrong. I had great hesitation about. I mean, obviously, the elephant in the room that isn't really the elephant is that the swim was canceled on Friday due to bad algae.
Okay.
And yeah, listen. You're usually like the smooth, cool cucumber on this, and I'm usually the guy fired up. And you've been a little more fired up about this than I have. I tend to think like this is kind of one of those cases where it was kind of like laid before you, and there's really not much you can do about it as being like unsafe and hazardous from everything I read. One of our other athletes who lives up in Ohio had her swim race canceled a week before due to the same thing. And, while it's not ideal, this is like one of the, although I know tons of athletes were super bummed, and I get it. I totally 100% understand that. And I'm going to get to like the various forms of that disappointment and the why here in a little bit. But this was like one of the few times that every person I talked to was like, yeah, I'm totally bummed and disappointed, but I saw the river. I get it. I'm not getting in that thing. And so I think that while that helped, I think that, it wasn't like some subjective call that RD made or, local officials or whatever made that was like, we can't swim in this, even though it looks like you can, we can't. Every athlete I talked to was like, yeah, I'm good with this call. It looks nasty. It looks disgusting. The whole surface of the water is green. And then, I'm sure you'll have a different take on this here in a minute because you can't seem to be like grumpy about the whole thing. is they announced it on Friday. And I get it. That's like, why couldn't they wait another day? But I don't think that you can. I think in situations like that, from what I understand about the testing process and the water quality, it's not like dropping a thermometer in the water and getting a reading. It's you have to take samples, you got to grow cultures. It's like a much more in-depth process that takes up to, if not longer than 24 hours. So you can't do it the day before. And so while they made the call early, I think that was in the best case and best interest of the athletes. I get it. And then to, hop back on the end of that train, as we walked and we were hanging out down there on Sunday morning, it was cold. Yep. It was, I would say, like, I don't think I saw like a temp reading in the 30s, but it was the lowest of 40s, and it felt every bit low. And I can imagine, as athletes may have been bummed there wasn't no swim. They worked hard for it. They wanted to do the whole thing. But I can imagine as they got there and got prepared to do the time trial start, they were thinking, you know what, this ain't half bad. Because and I think, again, like I want to talk about like how that changes the complex and dynamics of the race. It made things significantly easier. And I mean that not in terms of just shortening the 2.4 mile swim. Yes, that was a big game changer. Obviously, that's what everybody does. It's a 140.6. People want to argue about doing the full Ironman, whatever it is. But the biggest kicker for me in canceling that part was it made the rest of the race so much easier to navigate in terms of being smart, because you weren't going to be freezing. You're going to be cold, but you weren't going to be freezing. But they removed dynamic of how you were going to dress and how you were going to play the rest of the race was taken away. And as a coach observing and watching, I had a different feeling than I've ever had watching a race. I didn't have it in Chattanooga last year when they canceled the swim, because the temps were hot, but it wasn't like anything drastic like it was cold. And I just remember thinking, like, I'm not worried about anyone. And again, like, I don't want to worry as a coach, but removing the swim and then removing it removed so many decisions, in my opinion, that you had to make, that it was kind of like, once they get off the bike and everything is good, and as long as there's no like adverse, out of their control things that happen, like mechanicals or other athletes or volunteers or cars, then they're home free. And while it was great because it removed that level of stress, I think it really changed the complexity of the race from a race where athletes with certain fitness probably just got to show it and be done, because the weather was after that, like 9 o'clock, the weather was perfect. I don't know if I've ever attended an event where the weather was that ideal in terms of just the bike on the run. It was perfectly sunny skies. It was beautiful. It was the best racing weather I think I've ever attended. And so again, no Ironman is easy. They're all difficult. They all have their specific challenges. But the removal of the swim wasn't the biggest thing for me. It was the removal of the subsequent decision making and what do you wear and how long do you take in T2, and how are you going to adjust your pacing, that made it a much different race to approach tactically from where I was sitting.
Okay, I agree. It was definitely easier tactically. And I'm trying to let go of this stuff. I get a little bit, well, it just seems like there's so many swims getting canceled. Like, and, again, I don't know if that's true. I haven't looked at statistics. Maybe it's always been like this, but it just seems like it's really touching a lot of races. And I resisted this is how bad I am. I resisted the temptation to go take a water sample race morning and have it tested independently. Because I just feel like there's, I don't know. I mean, I feel like there was people out on the water and, in boats the next day, and there was just stuff going on. But I get it. The one thing I did hear, and this is one thing that's interesting, is I heard, some people were obviously bummed, especially first timers, I think, get really bummed about this. And, but I did hear like a lot of people say, hey, I'm not, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm good. I'm just going to go do my race and keep my race on. And that really is all you can do. It's just that, and I told you this, man, for me, spectating Ironman, even while doing an Ironman, the swim is like, it's the one thing that really gets me rolling. And I really love watching the swim. I love videoing the swim for my videos, and I love the energy and the nervous energy and all the stuff that comes with it. And I think I like it because of the opposite of what you're saying. I think I like it because it does force a lot of decision making, and it really does sort of make you stay in your calm. And there's just challenges there, whether or not the swim itself is difficult or whatever it is to you. It's just it's sort of it's a mind place that is tricky to sort of navigate sometimes. But anyway, I'm going to let it go. It was definitely, I don't think anybody should act, or feel like they're not an Ironman, because that is, like you said, it's a tough day. I mean, it wasn't like that. What they did wasn't anything, and they were getting, a lot of people were, struggling. It was a difficult day. So it always is. And I think, everyone is obviously should be proud that they finished and they're an Ironman and everything like that. So on to the race.
On to the race, and again, as usual, like every race presents its own challenges. And the part that I was kind of trying to get to was what I was wrong about was I had major hesitations on this 3-loop run. I think during the race I looked at you and I was like, they're not doing this race next year. They've totally mailed it in. I can't see how they're going to do this race next year. It seemed like a massive afterthought. I went and ran the day before with some other athletes. We ran over the river to the part of town you had mentioned before, I think an earlier podcast, and boy, what a neat part of town that is. It's obviously Indiana, so it's a different state, but it was, I think, Jeffersonville, maybe, something like that, but it was a super neat, I was like, man, it would be outstanding if they could find a way to run this up here, run over the walking bridge, down around this, like, cool part of town, come back over, plenty of things to see, plenty of things to do. And as I ran the other part, I was like, man, like there is nothing out here. And so while I was down on it. From a coaching aspect, it was fantastic because I got to see athletes all the time, basically standing in one position, which was great. And after the race, I actually got really positive feedback from the athletes that actually did it, which is what matters. Doesn't matter what I think as a spectator. The ones that did it were like, I loved it. I loved the change of pace. Obviously, they weren't as much of a fan of the turns. Loads and loads of turns, and as you got farther away from transition area, it was definitely lonely. But every race course is lonely on the run, in my opinion, depending on where you go. Wisconsin, there's lonely parts. Chattanooga, there's lonely parts. There's always going to be lonely parts of a course where most people are kind of congregated by transition / the finish line. It's just how it is. And then I thought that and then the fact that the day was so perfect, I was thinking 4th Street Live isn't going to be 4th Street Live because it's so far from the actual majority of the run course, because it was like a mile away, and everyone else is doing 3, so you're going to think fans and people who are cheering on the 11s are going to be on the run course, not going to be waiting at the finish. Plus, the weather was outstanding.
Yeah.
The 2 past years, everyone's like, I'm just going to hang out on 4th Street Live because it's covered, there's food, there's drinks, there's people, I can hang here and they can just come and finish and I ain't going to watch them. And as I finally made my way up to 4th Street Live, it was 4th Street Live. I mean,
It was kind of actually. I felt like it was almost better than I'd seen it.
I would have to agree with you. I was kind of shocked. And I was 100% wrong. I was like, there's not going to be that many people there. And again, like I walked up there a little bit around the same time that I usually do, and I was just stunned. It again, like it concretes. It is one of the best finishes on the North American circuit. Just the way that it is, and I think how loud it can be is another part. Just because it's inside, people banging against the rails, and it's just an exciting place. It's great. It checked all the boxes. Again, I was pleasantly surprised. Like I gotta give. I know that the dynamic between Ironman and the city is probably not on the greatest of terms. They're probably trying to work with each other on ways to make this stick. And then I saw that registration went live yesterday for AWA athletes and volunteers, and a firm date for next year. So I gotta imagine it's coming back, which I think is great. It's one of my favorite races. One of my favorite races to attend. I do. I love it there. I love the city. It would be awesome if they could get what they deserve, and I mean that. And the race itself is wonderfully put on. And I get it. They've had super bad luck with no swim this year, but perfect weather. Last year was a shortened swim with very, very difficult weather. And the year before was the whole race. And then you had Typhoon Tim come in around mile 80 of the bike and turn it from a warm summer's day to a brisk fall evening.
Yeah.
But again, you and I talked about this during the race. That's what you get when you move races to this time of year. You absolutely never know what kind of temperatures you're going to get. And as you and I discussed again, we're much bigger fans of, you didn't have these problems back in August when they had the original Louisville and people knew what they were getting. And I get it. It's a later time of year. The dates they're going to be cooler fall temps. But it's borderlining on winter temps on occasion with weather that's changing all the time. At least in the summer, you know what you're going to get, man. It's Louisville. It's the summer. You're going to get 80s, 90s, 100s, and it's going to be sunny. And you're lucky if it's even in the 80s. Other than that, everything else is as planned, and you just know what you're going to get. And so I get it. I get there are things out of your hands. There's probably political things that we couldn't even ever touch on in terms of money and finances and who wants this and who doesn't want this and where they think first-timers are more likely to go. But registration was high back in August. But again, I'm glad it looks like from the outside looking in that it's going to go on next year, which I think is great. Hopefully it's a good thing for the city. And again, and I will say quickly, it was the most competitive men's age group field I've ever witnessed.
It's pretty impressive.
It was absolutely mind-blowing. The times that the guys were spitting out were I think I clocked, and again, you got to give it some of the conditions, but even still then, it was just insane. It was loaded. The 9 out of the top 15 age group guys ran under 3-hour marathons.
Yeah. We
had a guy that did, I think in the 8s or there was no swim, but he did like a 5:03 or 5:04 bike, followed up by by just as an impressive run. I think his run was he had an 8:27 for the day. He did a 5:05 bike and then ran a 3:17 marathon, and that was good enough for 10th in his age group, which is just insane. It was also good enough for 27th overall, but it was just that's how good the field was. And I don't know why. I don't know if it was the AWA slots they were handing out that were extra for Kona, but it was absolutely loaded. I was just blown away by the amount of talent that was there that day, which again is why you can't judge things on where you place, because you never know who's going to show up. But all in all, to me, it was a great weekend. We can go into lessons we learned, the things we witnessed, and that made us think of certain things. But yeah, dude, it was a great race in great weather for what I think was dealt with them.
Oh yeah, One thing I want to say is I heard this multiple times. I was talking after you left yesterday morning. I was hanging out in the lobby for a while and talking to a few people, just trying to get a general sense of everything. And one of the things I kept hearing was they have never been around better volunteers. And I thought that was really cool to hear. They said it was just like they were super helpful. There was tons of them, and I'm sure that probably had something to do with maybe rerouting some from the swim and overlapping, maybe, hopefully. But still, Louisville always has great volunteers, and it's really well done. And I'm always happy to race there as well. The other thing I heard back, and it's interesting about the run course, because I heard some kind of not good stuff, and I think it was because of what you said. You kind of alluded to the turns, but it was more not just the turns, but the seemingly kind of thrown together out and back kind of U-turn stuff that they had faced. That was kind of maybe three times each loop kind of thing. And as we know, when you're in the middle of an Ironman run, those things are a lot harder than they seem normally to just turn around 180. And then of course the other thing was that there was a park out there that was super dark. I was talking to a older gentleman, even older than me, and he said that he was really even having trouble kind of seeing even with the lamp out there. So, and that's not a good feeling to run when you can't see the ground or whatever. So I did hear some of that, but again, it was the first time they were doing it, and they obviously changed it again late to try and make it work. So I know there's like complications all over the place. It's just that, some of the guys I talked to felt like there really wasn't a place to kind of get running, It was a lot of turns, and there was really it was almost the antithesis of what it used to be, which is like all you had was time to
straightaways. Yep.
Which is difficult in its own right. I'm sure that people were welcoming the different little ups and downs and elevation changes that weren't overly difficult, but it's the momentum thing that I think can be tricky.
Yeah, and it's going to slow you down. It's just all those turns. And I said that. It reminded me very much, very, very much like the Texas 70.3 run course. It was 3 loops. It was nothing but turns. It was and at some points it seemed like absolutely pointless out and backs, like loops around random ass parking lots and gravel for like what reason I have no idea, and just super hard to get to get and maintain your momentum. Which makes things slow. It's hard to keep, again, like when you're probably on like lap 2 or 3, like you're longing for straightaways where you can just get in a groove and keep your momentum. Obviously, like just from a physics standpoint, it's like objects at rest tend to stay at rest. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion, except for when they have to stop and start and stop and start and stop and start. So the accelerations that you have to do all that are continuous, I have to imagine that also took a lot out of the body. But yeah, I mean, the volunteer thing, again, like we had just a slew of athletes. We have a lot of athletes there in the Louisville, or I would call the Lou, Indiana area, volunteering. And yeah, I did. There was tons of volunteers. There were tons of people there doing it. And again, like I'm just very, very happy that, they got the race up like they did. The feedback I got in general was very, very good in terms of the experience, and it's great that they can also, as much as you're going to change anything, bringing it back to 4th Street Live always is like people remember a lot, but they remember the finish. It's like at least you got the cherry on top of what wasn't an ideal day in terms of canceling the swim and maybe a less scenic, run course. But let's be honest. The run course before wasn't anything to hoot and holler about anyway. No. I mean, it was boring as all get out. Like unless you, the only place you're going to see Churchill Downs is when you used to read it on the actual website. I had no idea I ever ran past Churchill Downs.
I know.
And I think I was out there like 4 times. I was like, no, never even knew it existed. It's like it just wasn't much to get. Again, like wasn't much to hoot and holler about, and it was lonely at times. But anyway, I digress. Again, congratulations to everyone who completed the event and went out there and gave it their best shot. But But to me, it was just a like massive, constant reminder of so many things that I think we can take from this sport, or change in terms of the way that we talk to people, the way that we treat people, the way athletes approach races, and then ultimately just again like that constant reminder of like what it's really all about. Did you have, before I go into mine, like did you have any like moments to where like you were just reminded, like, because again I think as seasoned athletes and coaches and obviously like some super seasoned spectators in terms of like these events, to be fair, it can sometimes kind of lose its luster.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's nothing, especially when you go to newer events, and I think that's also why I was so captivated by Texas earlier this year. Is it kind of loses a little bit of its luster, but as like the race goes on, like, you know, go ahead. Like, what was some like the moments or the images that you caught? Because obviously you were videoing all day that kind of brought back some things, or maybe you saw that was something you hadn't thought about before.
I had been videotaping, and I went back to the hotel, I think around 6 maybe or something like that. And it's real easy to kind of slide your way to the finish line as some of your people are coming in. And we had 17 athletes racing, and normally I'll just kind of spray around with video and kind of make my way up to the finish line and be there for most of the night. And instead I decided I wanted to go back, because that is one, I mean, I got to say, as far as spectating and videotaping, the run course setup was beautiful. I mean, it really allowed me to see a lot of different things. It was really accessible. The old run course, as you know, it was, you know, you'd see them kind of run out of transition, and then you wouldn't see them for about 2 hours, and they come back and then they'd be gone again. So it was kind of, in that regard, it just made it feel like the race was going a lot quicker to me. I told you that.
You did. You were getting like stressed out.
I was stressed because
it's almost over. I'm like, dude, it's 4. It's not.
No, because you see them come by. You see somebody twice on a run loop, and it's like, man, they're almost done, and they weren't. But it kind of had a little bit of a, as far as me shooting video, a little bit of a 70.3 feel, because it just felt like it was just coming, and people were coming fast and coming back around, and then all that sort of things. But anyway, I went back out to the run course in the dark around 7:30 or 8 or something like that, and that's where it's at, man. And I was, you know, people, it's easy to forget that, and when I go back out there, that's when it always crystallizes to me what this sport is. It's like people were struggling, you know, it's getting to be 8:30 or whatever, and they've got another loop out into the darkness, and you know, and I was just by myself standing on this road, and people were going by me, and I went, you know, they weren't like conversations or anything, but I just felt like this connection with people, and, you know, I just say, hey, you know, hang in there, keep it going, and they'd look up. It was like hard to look up, and yeah, sometimes, and they'd thank you every time, and that, I always forget how much that may mean to somebody, and I was really reminded in a hardcore way. And a lot of people, you know, I saw a few of our athletes too, and they really came up to me afterwards and said, man, I really needed to see you right then. And that's the kind of thing that, I don't know, makes it all worth it, I guess.
Yeah, man, I had two things that really stuck out to me, and one, you know, we, again, as a coach, like anytime all your athletes finish, it's the best case scenario. Like regardless of time, you know, again, like it's hard to judge, you know, PRs to PRs and race bests or performance bests, you know, compared to other courses when a swim is canceled, you know, because the whole day changes.
Yeah.
And again, like you know, the athletes that we work with, like they were super bummed there was no swim, not because it wouldn't be the full distance as much, but because they worked so hard on the swim, and then it made so many improvements they wanted to like actually see what it went on race day. But as I was, and they all crossed the finish line, which again is like just the greatest. I was at the finish line, I don't know, around 9 or something. An athlete that I've been working with for just over a year, he one of the first times I met him was at Chattanooga 70.3 this year, and he's got a wife, and he's got a super busy job. He's a very high level performer, and I think he runs and owns a business that has tons of locations, and he travels, but he's got, I think, 4 daughters, or 3 or 4 daughters. And I met them for the first time. There's family and his wife at Chattanooga 7.3 in the hotel, and one of the daughters, after I was like introduced myself, she like looked at me and she literally said, "Please don't let my dad die tomorrow." And I'm like, dude, I'm like, whew, as if I don't feel enough pressure on race day. Like,
wow.
now I'm like freaking out. But you could just you could see on their face that they couldn't, and obviously like kids are different, but even the wife, they had a hard time wrapping their mind around it, like what you were going to do and what you're going to put yourself through, because it is like, if people don't know what you're doing, like, and aren't in like the throw of being a triathlete, and you know some of your friends already are if you do the sport, that they're like I don't like, they can't wrap their mind around it. And that's why I think we as much as like we make fun of like some of the comments are like, so what are you doing today? Like, you're gonna swim like, you know, a little bit and bike for a little bit, and you're gonna run like a 10K? Because I don't think it's because they don't have the information, but B, it's because they're like, their mind doesn't make a leap to, oh my God, that's possible. And so he crosses the finish line, and I always like to wait for the athletes like way past the finish so I can actually say hi to him and, you know, give him a high five, congratulations, and, you know, share a little hug or something. And his wife in there, and like family and friends and the daughters were there, and they had these like huge signs with his face on it. And they like gave a hug or whatever, and his daughter would just like burst into tears. And he was like, why are you crying? But like, just to see, and he texted me after the race, and he was like, sorry, I meant to, you know, extend more of a thank you, you know, to you. Then we got to talk to my family for me, and I was like, dude, seeing your family's reaction was the best thank you that I could have gotten. Because, and that's again like why I love standing past the finish line, is because you get to see loved ones interacting with loved ones, and how emotional the family gets. Like, I saw husbands just like straight up bawling watching their wives finish, and vice versa, wives. And it just reminds me like how unbelievable these feats are. And again, like as a coach and as a spectator, like you get numb to it sometimes, and because you've seen it a lot, and it becomes the norm because it is the life that you live. It's the people that you surround yourself with, so it's not shocking sometimes. But I think that you forget like how incredible it is, and how incredible these people who are, who don't just navigate the training and don't just navigate the race, that they had to navigate life with all those. And to be honest, life is hard enough to navigate. You know, like I was in the middle of the race up there with you, and Allie and Hayden were back here in Chattanooga, and my mom came up to visit for fall break, and then we got some like super sad news while everyone was out on the bike that we had my mom had to, and sister had to put their dog down, and just out of nowhere, my mom had to leave Chattanooga like immediately to try and make it back to Nashville before he passed away. And it's just a dog that I love, and I actually named him. And I was like, man, it's just like the hits never stop. You know, like that's why, like we always say, and obviously it's harder to practice than it is to preach, but it's like, you know, never try and get too high or get too down, because the hits just keep coming. Life is relentless, and even when things seem like incredible, anything can happen. And I think that's like that whole situation, because it got me, obviously for obvious reasons, brought me kind of down for the day, but seeing that embrace in their family, and how like happy and just like emotionally, where it was like, man, like this is what it's all about. You know, because again, like that's why we say every race is hard, because there's so many things to navigate, and then when you finish, you're happy with the result. But like I truly believe that some of like the I can't believe I did it faces and comments and phrases and hugs and embraces are more about the fact that they made it like here to this finish line, like not just the training they went through, but the things that happened in life. Because very few people's training is ideal. And after that, I went back on the run course and was catching people like on the last mile and a half. And again, you know, I feel like this is like the I'm Wrong podcast, but I've been trying, and I'm not great at it, to 100% be honest, is not checking my tracker as much as I do in race day, and keeping my head up and talking to people more. I did it more this race. than I have the last few races. I was trying to be mindful of it, but it was like past 9:30, 10 o'clock, and you got some of the last finishers on this lonely stretch of street where there's no fanfare because you're like close to the finish line. And I was trying to do a much better job of like, hey, good job, you're almost there. And it just reminded me of just life and how we so oftentimes just keep our mouth shut and don't say anything. And we're totally distracted with things that we can't control, when if we just look up, there's probably somebody around us that we're friends with, or that we know, or that we're around, or we work with, that just need like a keep up the good work.
Yeah.
Or you're almost there. And just like you never know what those words are going to do for somebody. Like on the race course, you never know what those words are going to do for somebody, whether they're having a great day or a bad day, they're in a rough patch or a good patch. And more oftentimes we just kind of assume they're okay by the way they look, the way they act, or that somebody else is going to say it. And that the high fives and the cheers and the small words of the "you got this," grit it out, because me, I'm not a rah guy.
Yeah.
I'm an even keel guy, but sometimes just like the "hey, you got this," you're just around the corner and it's all going to be over, And again, for me, it was just a constant reminder of personally things I know I can get better on, but just of life, and how like just the small words and not being distracted in our own element when around us there's so much going on that we could absorb and help with.
Yeah. The whole event is so energized, and there's so many people and so much going on that what you're talking about might be the thing that gets forgotten sometimes. And I think that's what I was trying to say when I was down there by myself, and I was like one of the only people on this little stretch of road. And I'm sort of the same way as you are sometimes. I kind of just observe or I'm shooting video. And actually what happened is a sort of a change in my mentality, in the sense that I just put my camera on a tripod and either let it roll or shut it off. And I was just there. And I made like everyone that came by, I said something to. And that's just not like me, it's the same kind of deal. It's, little things. And it was sort of like it really did bring me into the moment again and I think we tend to forget how important connection can be, even if it's just the littlest thing. And it's just, in the middle of a 15-hour day for somebody, if you just say, "Hey, you're looking good," or "keep going," or, "we're behind you," or whatever. And it's like those kind of words and connection with somebody just in an instant can really make a difference. And so maybe I thought of one other thing that was really cool. Towards the end, I guess, we were at 4th Street Live, and I was walking around getting some shots or whatever, and I put my camera away, and then I'm like, wait a minute, I had a VIP kind of bracelet thing, and thanks, David, and I went up to the VIP lounge, which was above the finish line, and second floor or something, and I just wanted to look at the vantage point. And I got up there, and it was just a little bit behind the finish line, and I was just shooting video straight down, and one of our athletes was volunteering. We had a lot of athletes volunteering, and I think that was so awesome too. And one of our athletes was volunteering, and I was waiting on the tracker. I saw that one of our other athletes was coming in soon, and I happened to notice our volunteer athlete down there just looking at his phone, and I could see he was waiting. How some athletes will wait to greet the person that they're waiting for. So the volunteers will go ahead of them, and they'll just kind of wait until they come in. And I could tell he was tracking, waiting for our guy. And as soon as he came in, he kind of gave the phone to somebody else, or he was videotaping him come in. And then I was on this the whole time with my camera, watching and videotaping him wait for our athlete. And then when he came across the finish line, they gave a huge embrace, and it was really cool. And a lot of other people kind of took pictures of that same scene, and I was just up there sort of like nobody knew what was going on, and it was just so natural and candid that it was just beautiful.
I got pictures of it. I think I know we're talking about the same one, the same kind of embrace. But it's there it is, man. There's nothing like it. And again, that's why I think every athlete, as much as you, I don't know, man. Like we watched Kona the day before, and we don't have time to go into that whole thing on this cast. We'll go over on Thursday because I have a lot to talk about that. Um, but I had like a couple people I was talking to, random people that I didn't know during the race, spectators, that anytime, and again, don't get me wrong here, qualifying for the Ironman World Championships is an incredible accomplishment. It is an incredible feat. It is a outstanding accomplishment. Some people would say it is the pinnacle of the sport for age groupers, and it's impressive, but it's not everything. And every like line drop that I had with somebody talking was like, yeah, well, he went to Kona 8 years ago, and he went. I'm like, well, and I was like, okay, just listen to him. Then I kind of thought, I was like, you're looking around and you're watching these people, and you think that not that Kona is never in their mind, or it's not something they're going for, but that what every athlete out there is battling or trying to accomplish is their own, and it is incredible in and of itself. And I think as a coach, I would probably venture to say I have a different perception, because knowing the athletes that I work with, like I do, like when I see them, I don't see just like, oh, you're running a 10:20. Or a 9 minute. I see like the nights were up late with your kid, the long work days, the crazy travel, the sickness, the injuries, the whatever it is, the downtime, the hard things that happen around your life or your relationships or your kids, or because life is just life doesn't suck, but dear God, it can suck the life out of you. And so when I see them, I just think like, man, this is just amazing, and I think that's why it's such a it can be such a positive for athletes to do it, that it can bring so many good things to their life. And that's why I think everyone, regardless of their time and their speed, or whether they consider themselves a front end, a middle of the pack, or a back of the pack person, should be celebrated. Because everyone has their own challenges, and everyone's day is their own, and a win is just getting across the finish line, because it's not just representative of the day, it's representative of the year, and not everyone can make it to the line. Not everyone has that opportunity. Like, we had an athlete that was originally going to do Wisconsin, and she had an injury, and then like started running again like 8 weeks before Louisville. It was like, can I do this? And I was like, yes, but we need to be incredibly careful, and you're going to listen to everything I say. I'm going to make you walk run, because I don't care about your finishing time. I just care that you're not in a boot 4 weeks later, because it's about being able to continue to do this. And so I think it's something, just an important reminder for us all, that everyone out there should be encouraged and rooted for and celebrated, because we all have our own mission in life. We all have our own obstacles. We all have our own triumphs, and they look different from everyone. And you could think someone's life looks great because they're fast, but in reality, when they wake up on Monday morning and life is back to regular scheduled programming, things are a lot more difficult. And so I just think it's a great reminder of just who we are, and who we are as humans, the things that we could do for each other to do better, to be more supportive, to be more encouraging, to be more welcoming. And I just, I do. It always brings me back to earth. It's like while I leave these events, like always thinking from a performance standpoint, all right, what can I do better as a coach? Where can I improve? What training are we doing that we might need to tweak with this specific athlete? Like, I think about that, but then honestly, like the first 24 hours, like on the way home yesterday, all my thought was, how can I figure out a way to maybe support these athletes better emotionally and mentally, leading up to the race or out anyway, because I just think it's the most underrated aspect of the event, is coming into a race emotionally and mentally prepared. But that's also one of the things that I feel like I am good at, is having athletes that are self-sufficient and prepared, and they don't need me to rah-rah. They don't need me to yell at them. They just need me, they don't even need me there. If they need me there, then I haven't done my job. But they're just resilient, won't use any expletives like I like to. They're just resilient, tough people. And I love working with people like that. And everyone out there that, again, did that race, and I'll get off my soapbox, but everyone who competes in any race like that and gives their best and works through the things they have to work through, I think that should be celebrated.
Mm. Yeah, man, I think you're really good at...
I seem like a Lifetime podcast right now. Sorry.
It really is.
God,
but it's important, man. Like, nobody knows that more than I think. Going into, obviously the training all the way up, it's a lot of work. You go through ups and downs and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's so important to kind of go into that day. There's such a danger of putting times and goals and things on you because, you talk about it all the time, but it's, you never know what's going to happen that day. And I mean, I think that I'm getting better at it. I think our athletes are getting better at it. And this is just what I see in a general sense, is that going into a race like that with understanding that it's part of the process and with realistic expectations and things like that. So when you don't come down off that high, that there isn't just a cliff. When you go into that, this is all, part of the journey, and you want to keep getting better, and it's difficult. I mean, you understand. We know it's tough, but understanding that in its own right is something to be proud of, and it's pushing you the right direction. And just because certain things didn't go your way doesn't mean it was a failure. It's just a continuing channel, just like life is. Like ups and downs, and you can't get down. And I feel like we see that a lot more. And I feel like we see people like, all right, that was awesome. I mean, it's so weird to think of it being awesome. You know what I mean? Just 'cause
it's so warped, man.
Yeah, but for me, as sort of a Zen practitioner or aficionado or somebody that aspires to be that way, I love the idea that it truly is one of those things where it's very difficult to get out of the moment. And I think that's practice. I think that you get, some people out had 8 hours of it. Some people had 15 hours of it yesterday, or Sunday. But there's not much more you can think about when you're late in that run other than, man, how do I move my legs and how do I get through this? And I think that to me is the underlying most valuable part of all this stuff. So
speaking of like just being like fresh and the mental aspect of it is, and again, this is like total observation and being, and placing on assumptions, but that's also from what I know about being a coach and working with so many athletes or athletes that come from other coaches. Is like we talked about this before on a couple other podcasts, but there are I think for me, like I could even, again, it's totally just like guessing, but I think there's some truth to it, is I could see athletes that were broken on the run at like their 10th step. Like just not broken as in like their stride is broken, but they're like, I can't believe I have to suffer through this again.
Yeah, right.
And and I posted something in the closed Crushing Iron group on, I don't know, Saturday or Sunday morning about Dan Lorang, who was the head coach, the coach of the two champions in Kona. He coached both the male and female Ironman world champion. And it was kind of an excerpt from this article that I was reading that I think he was being interviewed on, and he talked so much about performance, but he also said, he said, parts of it said, try to keep your athletes fresh in the head is the most important part in high performance sports. He must be at 100% in his head to deliver 100% of his physical performance. And I cannot, that is again, not, we talked about this before Chattanooga, I think you and I, is that that was again, when I was seeing athletes head out onto the run course, the ones who had suffered through so many long, just physically and emotionally and mentally draining runs, I didn't feel were going to do as well, because you're not going to come to the start line so mentally fresh. You're already going to be, again, I think that's one of the most underestimated aspects of of training and preparing athletes to race is that if they're not mentally and emotionally fresh, then regardless of what physical fitness or performance that they're capable of, they're not going to be able to achieve anywhere close to what they're capable of if they're mentally and emotionally void of energy or freshness, however you want to put it. Because in order to dig that deep, it's got nothing. It's not like, oh, they don't have the physical fitness or they want it bad enough. It's where are they mentally? Do they want to keep pushing? Do they have it in them? Because there are so many, like, and I think again, like, that may sound like it's something you can not take seriously, but it's so much like life. Like, one bad thing happens in a day and you're like, I can make this. Two things, you're like, I did it, but here we go again. Like, I got this. But when things really start to pile up, your response or your energy to combat that obstacle becomes harder and harder and harder to combat or to overcome or to see through. And you get to a point where finally it's like, you know what, I give up. Like, I ain't got nothing left in me today. I don't have anything. I don't have any fight left in me. I don't have any pushback to give. You got me. You win today. And I just think that there's so much to take from that mental emotional part as you take it to endurance sports, is that you have to have athletes that have suffered before, like suffered in a positive way. That was a good learning experience that didn't put them in any kind of physical danger or place and position where they could be injured, but to where they know they can do that themselves. And I challenge my athletes a lot, and it takes a lot of patience to work with me, and I know this because I want them to think for themselves, and I want them to dig themselves out of these emotional and mental places with a little bit of a nudge, because on race day they have to answer their own questions, and they have to be the one to call from within to get them to push them to where they want to go. Not me, not any yelling from me with a megaphone and a cowbell. That's not going to make them go any faster. They are. And equipping athletes and positioning themselves to have that as a weapon is a greatly undertrained aspect of endurance racing, is preparing athletes, because it's easy. It's easier to give your athletes every answer, because you can have control, you can act like you know everything. Some coaches see their athletes as their customer, but you want them to be. It's a partnership, and you want to challenge them. You want to equip them as best you can to combat everything. And you don't want to send somebody out who, to me, is just physically fit but has very little mental and emotional strength. And so I think going into these races, and I think I find that I see it being more and more talked about in articles and on podcasts with highly respected coaches, is the mental aspect that goes into it, and it was like one of the very, very first things I ever said to you when we were talking about training for Ironman. It was about the Ironman marathon. And my words to you were, you only have to do it once. Because you can do anything one time. And yes, does that formulate how we train and how we coach people and the intensities and stress loads we put on athletes? Sure. But the other biggest thing is like, is the mental aspect of it, because it seems so daunting as we kind of revert back to the beginning of this podcast. We talk about how impossible it seems, for athletes, is that you forget that in training, like, it mirrors that and it resembles that, and it can bring up those emotions of this is impossible. But when you say, like, hey, you've got to do, it's like a college football or any pro sports, when you have like one terrible team, and they, like Appalachian State beating Michigan, whatever it was 10 years ago, like, they beat them in one game. But if you ask them to play best 7 out of 11 or whatever, you'd put all your money on Michigan, right? But you can do the impossible one time. And wrapping your mind around that is so much easier than bashing it into your body every weekend with 7-hour bike rides and 2-hour brick runs and 3.5-hour long runs on Sunday. Not only, in my opinion, is it just flat out wasting your time, it is digging you a hole closer to how you're going to wrap your mind around the impossible. Not making it possible to quote unquote do the distance, but it's chipping away at, gosh, I've got to, like, I just don't know how I'm going to do this. And again, I just think that there's there are ways to hopefully that we can all do better, preparing ourselves as individuals and as athletes and as coaches to be able to combat the stresses and the obstacles and the things and the circumstances that are going to arise on race day, and prepare ourselves like that in training.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I've been really thinking about that a lot. And I think that when you told me that about it's just one day, and my response always throughout that year was, I just want to feel the best I've felt all year on that day.
Mm-hmm.
And that obviously encompasses emotional and physical. And to me, it is that. It's like that day when you're a kid and you wake up early and you go out to start playing in the field or whatever, and like you don't come in till 6:30 that night and you've been running around all day. It's that same kind of like, you didn't expect to do that necessarily, you just felt it and you just did it. You're like, wow, if I'd have known that I was going to go out here and have to do that all day, I might not have, even broached it. But I just think that it's such a massive part of it. If you come into a race broken down and, you've trained a lot and you can get through it, but, to have sort of that special moment, you have to really focus on dialing it in to that point where you're like, man, I feel amazing right now, today. And of course, all the other stuff that goes with it, but good job, everybody.
Sponsored by Kleenex.
Kleenex. See, we're getting soft in our old age, man.
Oh my gosh, dude, we go on our streaks. But no, listen, it's always like that when you watch that, when you see people accomplish these dreams these goals they've had for such. And again, that's also the part that always sticks with me. Is that we live in a world of Facebook goal setting that you never complete. They have athletes that sign up for races and work their butt off and complete that goal. That's what it says to them. It's a reward for their hard work and their commitment and their consistency and their ability to stay healthy and so many other things that you can. Everyone likes to make these outstanding claims on social media, and then everybody gets all excited about them like they've already done them. When the hardest work is what's left. And again, I think that's why it's incredibly admirable. It doesn't happen, as with everything that's great and sustainable and rewarding, is it's not overnight. You can't do it in a day. You got to build it over time, and that takes so much effort. Not to quit and to put it together and to show up and get it done, regardless of how you're feeling. Now, that's what it's kind of a teaser. Part of what I want to talk about as I watch the Kona broadcast on our Thursday podcast is watching Daniela Reef, 4-time Kona world champion, I think 7 or 8-time total 70.3 Ironman world champion, have like what looked like just an absolutely just like the roughest of rough days, and how she basically just like girded her way to the finish line to finish no matter what. Because something she's always said was, I just want to give my best effort today regardless of what that looks like. And obviously it didn't probably look the way she hoped it would look. But yeah, so this is just something as a very weak teaser that I want to talk about on Thursday. But again, congrats to everyone. And again, it was wonderful to meet everyone and be in contact with so many of our athletes and our listeners and seeing people again. So again, congratulations to everyone for finishing. Again, big shout out to the city of Louisville for putting on a good show. Again, apologies to anyone who stayed at the Galt House. We warned you. Hey, if you came by Club Marriott, you know where the action's at.
Yeah.
But no, great event, great weekend. Always have a good time. Hey, if it's your first time listening, again, we appreciate it. Dig back in the archives. We've got 300 plus for you to dig through. And if you want more info, you can about all the things we do. Our one-stop shop is crushingiron.com. You can go there for info on training and coaching packages, our camps, swim analysis, blog, gear, you name it, it's on there. Check it out, and then be on the lookout here in the next week to 2 weeks for one of Mike's Ironman Louisville tribute videos, which is sure to be awesome.
Yeah, a lot of good. I got a lot of good stuff.
A lot of good stuff.
Yeah, this has been the Crushing Iron podcast of emotional sincerity.
Emotional sincerity, brought to you by Pampers. Anyway, no. If you got any questions, comments, concerns, feedback, whatever, hit up MikeCrushingIron@gmail.com. And if you want to reach out to me directly, you can go to drphil@gmail.com. No, C26Coach@gmail.com. We appreciate you listening, and we'll catch you on Thursday.
All right, buddy. Appreciate it, man.